The superintendent and Senate races are just two of those we'll be following on Tuesday night during our live Oklahoma Votes 2014 election coverage. We'll have results, interviews, and analysis of congressional, statewide, and legislative races. Earlier, I spoke with eCapitol News Director Sean Ashley about some of what he's been finding on the campaign trail. Sean, it's getting close to Election Day, and there are some emerging themes in legislative races that you've identified.
Yeah, as I've been looking through the various legislative primaries, what I see are a number of things sort of in common among the various races. In Senate District 12, for example, where Senate President Pro Tem Brian Bingman is being challenged by John Connect, what we see is a concern that the incumbents, the established members of the party, are not in contact with the grassroots, and a desire to move more towards the people in the district and away from the politicians in the district, let's say. There are others, though, and we've seen this in some of the congressional races in the state, too, who are sort of challenging one another on the basis of who is the most conservative. And we see people offering a way to sort of measure that. In Senate District 20, for example, where Dan Ladd is challenging A.J. Griffin, he offers his high 5 points for decision-making. That's sort of where he attempts to show that he is more conservative. He asks, does it follow Judeo-Christian beliefs? Does it follow the U.S. Constitution, protect Oklahoma from federal overreach? Does it promote fiscal responsibility? And does it promote free enterprise and capitalism for Oklahoma?
So that's a definition of conservatism that has at least emerged in that particular race.
In that particular race, yes.
And a lot of the races, the candidates are trying to draw a distinction between themselves, and we do see some familiar words and phrases being used, especially conservative.
That's true. We see that term being used over and over again. The question becomes, sort of like Mr. Ladd has attempted to do, how do you define that term? Throughout the various races at the legislative level, at the congressional level, we see various efforts to show that I am, in fact, the more conservative candidate. And in some cases, even we have a sitting senator, Senator Cliff Brannon, who is being labeled a liberal. But if you look at his voting record, he is stuck with the Republican Party. He's had a very conservative voting record and has been well ranked on conservative rankings. He's a member of the Republican Party. It's unusual to see someone like that labeled a liberal.
And in some races, traditional issues, have been more important.
That's very true. We see that particularly in Senate District 46, where current Representative Kay Floyd is running and facing Wilfredo Rivera in that race. Representative Floyd is a former judge, and she stresses her time as a judge as well as her time in the House as key qualifications for her, and addresses very specific issues. She talks about creating jobs, improving education, caring for women and children, and improving or smarter government. Wilfredo Rivera, on the other hand, a former member of the public school board here in Oklahoma City, talks about reforming education. So we see that issue of education raising its head, and common legislative themes like jobs and improving or smarter government.
What do you see in the Congressional District 5 race?
That is sort of the ultimate question, and anyone you talk to will probably give you a different answer. You have a large number of candidates in that race, in the Republican primary particularly, and I think it's anybody's game. We haven't seen any numbers out of that race recently. More than likely, you'll be looking at a runoff. Exactly who will be in that runoff depends on who you talk to.
T.W. Shannon and James Lankford, the front-runners for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate, held a debate on Wednesday, and it was rather lackluster. What does that say?
That's very true. And what I think that tells you is that neither candidate believes they're going to win this thing outright on Tuesday. If they felt like they were close to getting a majority of the votes, one of them would have gone for the knockout punch. On the other hand, if one of them was trailing significantly, he would have tried to make up that ground by going for a knockout punch. What we saw is them agreeing on most major issues, sharing common values and views, and I think that one too comes down to a runoff, most likely.
Outgoing Senator Tom Coburn, the man they hope to replace, has weighed in on campaign tactics in that race.
That's exactly right. In particular, he's pointing to these independent expenditure groups that have been attacking both candidates. And in particular, what he was noting was that James Lankford was an honorable man and a conservative, for that matter. But he was critical of the entire process in these ads, which seem to violate what Republicans often call Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment, that you don't attack another Republican. And he said this is one of the problems we have with the political process in the United States, and specifically in Oklahoma and in this race.
And the state superintendent's race has taken on a negative tone.
That's very true, both by the candidates themselves and by outside groups involved in that race. That is going to be fought to the very, very end, and it will be up to voters to decide on Tuesday.
eCapitol News Director Sean Ashley will visit with you on Tuesday night during our Oklahoma Votes election coverage beginning at 7 o'clock. Thank you as always.
I'm looking forward to it.